I want a hunting knife.
A knife crime.
Body stabbing and kitchen knife.
With a large hunting knife.
But I'm a miner.
So today I'm going to try to make one and then attempt to sell it for a crazy price like all these viral YouTube videos. This is going to be insanely hard to do as I've never forged anything in my life, let alone a knife with a leather sheath. But I'm not going to give up until I have something I'm proud of.
Alright, see this pile of wood. If I borrow some petrol from my dad's car and light it on fire, I have a flame that reaches 300 degrees. But that isn't enough to forge steel. So the way around that is by pumping air into the forge with something like a hairdryer or a blower to reach temperatures over 1500 degrees, hot enough to melt steel. But since I can't use my mum's $80 hairdryer she got for Valentine's Day, as I think she would notice as they have a tendency of catching on fire, my dad's 1800 watt leaf blower will have to do.
The only reason I know all this is the rats in my roof were keeping me up last night at 3 AM. And I went down a rabbit hole of watching old bald men steal their wives' hairdryers and make beautiful knives with them, so this guy can say,
Your weapon will kill.
So to make my forge, I grabbed some square-holed tubing, a bag of $20 BBQ briskets, which according to this clanker should last 5 hours of forging time. Spoiler alert, it didn't, and this forge burnt up so much money I almost gave up. Watch the end to see if I can turn a profit.
I also got some galvanized steel to weld the railroad spike to.
and it also has the added bonus of giving me brain cancer.
So all up so far, I've spent $60 to make the forge, which equals 5 hours making pizzas. But luckily, I don't have to buy an anvil, as I already have this old shoemaking anvil and this vise with a flat spot on it. For a hammer, I didn't feel like spending $200, so I'm going to work with what I already have. I cut the steel, then bent it, and then used my great welding skills to expand the tube so the blower could fit into it easily. Then I triggered all my viewers with trypophobia, dug a hole, and stole some bricks from the foundation of my shed.
Firing up the forge was harder than expected. I'm using a weed burner here, but a better option would be to soak the charcoal in petrol and light it all on fire. But after I hooked up the blower, it got really hot really quickly. And it seems like this project might actually work.
Just in case you're wondering, yes, I am using a railroad spike. I found it a few weeks ago, and since I'm not on the news for derailing a train, I think I'm fine. The type of knife I'm going for here is a Damascus chef's knife, as rich celebrities love flexing on their poor viewers, and people are willing to spend $7,000 for one. Damascus is formed by getting two different types of steel, welding them together, and hiring an Asian guy to fold them over thousands of times until you get a pattern that you like. Since I only have one nail and one type of steel at the moment, I'm going to try to make a hammer on the blade, but more on that later. Since this is my first time forging, I was terrified of the red hot nail on steroids 30 centimeters away from my body. So that's why I'm wearing used full body painter clothes. Not that it would help if the steel fell on me, but it's better than wearing nothing.
I'm way too hot. I'm gonna fire out with some water, come back at probably 4 or 5 when it's nice and cool outside. That'll probably be better as well because I can see the heat of the steel more easily. It's very hard to see in the sunlight.
Okay, it's 5:30. The sun's starting to go down, it's a lot cooler. Let's make this knife.
I'm starting to regret not getting a gas forge, as starting a wet forge is almost impossible. Luckily, my dad bought these gas bottles for a blackout, and they are really useful to heat the forge back up. I'm trying to squish the nail into a 2.5mm strip, and I'm starting to see the knife inside the billet come out. Turns out I made the forge a little bit too good, and it melted the knife in half.
Oh, just melt it. It's gone. It's gone. Oh no. It just completely melted. It's gone now. No. Great. That looked like a good knife. I only put it in for like a minute. I guess I can only put it in for like a few seconds. It's like, maybe I could draw that into a really small knife? How long till dinner's ready? What is for dinner? It's the next day. This is what it looks like. I think I've successfully made a long nail into a shorter nail.
And I can't even forge this into a mini knife, as burning the steel destroys the internal steel structure. So unless this video goes viral and someone wants to buy this slightly flat nail, I'm going to store it on my dresser table, so I can look back at how much I improved in a few years' time. But I'm not going to give up. Did the person who invented modern abstract art get it right the first time they threw paint on a canvas? Yes, they did. That was a really bad example, but you get the point. Now recently we had a massive hailstorm and we were worried that this enormous tree would fall over. So my dad decided to hire some tree loppers to cut it down. They charged us $3,500, only cut half the tree down and left all the logs without taking them away. This was a terrible hit on my dad's bank account, but a perfect opportunity for me to upgrade my anvil, as the more weight you have underneath it, the better. I'm thinking about making some coffee tables with this wood and selling them on Etsy, so if you'd like to see that, subscribe.
Okay, since I've run out of nails to use for blacksmithing, I want to take my dirt bike down to the tracks and get some more. Got my drone to get some shots for you guys, and I've also got the snake bandage just in case I get bit by a snake, which is probably quite likely because I live in Australia. Yeah, let's go. Front tyre is completely flat and I've got a leaking carburetor, but hey, it should take me there and back. Great, there's a massive crack in the tank. Okay, let's go.
Now, just in case a cop is watching this, I actually turned my bike off and let my dog pull me the whole way there. And then when I got to the tracks, I let him run home. Also, just in case you guys are wondering, if I can't find any today, I could buy the nails on eBay for $5 a pop. But since I am a complete beginner blacksmith, I will probably burn through quite a few of them before I make anything that resembles a knife. So I'm really hoping I find some here today. This is when I noticed a group of people exactly where I had to go past to get to the tracks. And their car looked very similar to the crack addict's car that chased me quite recently. But going past them was the only way to get to the tracks. So I started up my bike, said a prayer, and luckily it wasn't them.
Okay, that is the train tracks. That's where I get all the nails from. Usually they fall off here and they're like down around here. So I'm just gonna go for a walk around, see if I can find any. They're pretty abundant around here. Be careful because I don't actually have a air filter for my carburetor. I lost it, so try not to get any dust in it. There are a ton of brown snakes around here, so I've got to be really careful. Okay, nice, we're here. When they tore up these tracks, they just left them all across the ground. So if I look carefully, I'll be able to spot them. Turn the bike off here, eh? Okay, so fly my drone up and get some cool cinematic shots of this bridge. Pretty nice up there. See all these nails all around here? That's exactly what I'm trying to find. All of these are embedded in the actual bridge, but quite a lot of them fall down when they pour up the railway track. Just gotta be careful around here because there's quite a lot of wild dogs and dingoes that have chased me a few times, so I want to keep near to my bike just in case. Let's get my drone out and get some cool shots. Okay, see something like that right there? If it wasn't illegal, what I'd do is like cut that off and use that as an anvil. Anyway, enough goofing around, let's find some nails. Okay, last time I was here, I had some luck just down here. See if there's any more down here now.
I came here 1 year ago on my e-bike and there were hundreds of nails all over the ground. But it seems that a lot of people have discovered that there is a gold mine of free metal here. So I'm going to keep going down the tracks until I find some.
Yes! Yes, okay. First one. Sick. Hey, let's go. I found another one. This must be like a hotspot because I found the other one right there. How does this keep happening every time I turn my camera on?
With two in my bag, I only had to find 18 more. Unfortunately, I ran out of proper brake oil, so I'm now running olive oil in my brake calipers. And it actually seems to be working really well, until it didn't. And now I have no way of stopping. This is when I discovered the spot that would change everything. It might not look like much, but since this area wasn't covered up with grass and snakes, the nails just started appearing out of the rocks.
Chuck it over here.
Yeah, this is exactly what I'm looking for. A spot just like this. There's two more. A spot just like this. It's just rocks and gravel. I can easily spot them. Okay, so I've got 5 so far. This is going well. Keep looking. 6, 7. This is going really well. 9. And it wasn't long until I found enough nails to make this guy jealous. If I was to do this again, I would have definitely put the nails in a plastic bag, not directly in my school bag, as I did work experience last week, and every time I got food out of my bag, it was completely covered in rust dust, which probably gave me tetanus. And just like that, I think I've got about maybe even 20 nails. Let's get my backpack, put them in, let's get out of here. Very successful trip. Man, my bag's heavy. Must weigh like a good 30 kilos. Okay, nails secured. Let's get out of here before someone does a noise complaint. I walked the trail twice. Probably got sunstroke now. I found it. Guess where it was? In my bag in a secret pocket. Okay, cool. I found it. As a matter of fact, I'm gonna put the bag on this way.
Finding these nails today saved me $100, which is money I can invest in other parts like leather for the knife sheaths. I would also like to thank SKVMBXGGG for buying one of my pens from my previous video. It really helps motivate me to stay up really late every night to edit these videos. But even if you don't feel like buying a pen, simply just subscribing or watching the entire video helps me immensely towards my goal of getting monetized. Thank you.
Run of this one. My forge is going to be completely wet.
I'm not going to kill the audience retention of this video by showing the 2 hours of miserable footage I took boiling rainwater out of this charcoal. But once it finally hit that sweet forging temperature, I grabbed the least rusty nail and prepared for phase 1 of forging this knife. Hammer time.
Turn the forge off, eat some dinner, come back out. As you can see, it's nice and hot, it's ready. Yeah, let's try and forge out a knife, something that resembles a knife.
Now you might remember the galvanized steel thing I welded onto the previous nail. I spent more time straightening it than actually forging the knife. So I tried hitting up some of the major blacksmithing eBay stores. I basically said, hey, do you want to sponsor me? I need some tongs. They sent back an email that essentially translated to, your subscriber count is statistically irrelevant, go away child. So I'm going to be using these adjustable grips that I bought for $30 and praying that I don't drop the nail on my foot. Remember how last time I was forging, I was wearing a full body suit? Well, this time I was a bit too confident in my newfound skills, and I thought there was no way I could drop the nail on my foot, so I just wore thongs. Not surprisingly, a little piece of slag fell off and hit me on the foot. I then ran to put some cold water on it and accidentally stepped on my extension cord. This normally wouldn't be a problem, but a hot ember had fallen on it and exposed the bare copper. I didn't get the scream of pain on camera when my sweaty foot got shocked with 240 volts, but it was so loud that my dog on the other side of the house started barking. But if that wasn't bad enough, I started to run out of charcoal, and my forge wasn't getting hot enough anymore. So I put my forge out again, grabbed a few more logs, and lit a fire underneath them to try and turn it into charcoal, which will burn hotter and cleaner than this wet wood would burn if I just tried to burn it as it is. It didn't really work well, but I'm hoping it at least boiled some of the sap and moisture out of it. This is when I realized that the reason why the last nail melted was because the blower was pumping out winds over 320 kilometers per hour, which not only blew half of the embers of the fire away, the embers that didn't get blown away got so much air on them, it made them white hot, which is not good if you like your steel keeping its carbon content, which you need if you want your knife to hold an edge. So I went on eBay and bought one of these uncertified, sketchy 4000 watt variable speed reducer dial things, and 3 weeks later, it arrived. Which brings us to the will this Chinese charger burn down my shed again segment of the video. The last time I bought something on China and plugged it in, it burnt down my shed. So as you can see by the expression on my face, I don't have high hopes.
Okay, so far so good. Now, if I turn this dial, this should turn on. Phew, I was wondering why that wasn't working. I need to turn this on. Okay, 3, 2, 1. Yes! 20% power. Let's see how fast it goes. Let's try 40%. Nothing, okay. Let's try 80%.
Anything below 60% power is a bit erratic, but I'll take it. And a 1-for-1 win against the cheap Chinese CEOs. But I'm not going to be putting it in my new shed anytime soon. As you can see here, I'm digging out my forge. I need to make sure all the holes are exposed and not filled up with debris. While I was doing this, an idea came into my head. Why waste time waiting for the thick, wet logs to dry in the sun, when I can just create a teepee of wet wood around the forge? The intense thermal energy from the forge should flash boil the moisture out of it. Turns out there's a reason why literally 0 people on YouTube have done this. Wood exposed to 1000 degree temperatures instantly catches on fire, even if it's wet, and my forge turned into a bonfire. So to start this fire I need some charcoal. Luckily when I tried to burn all these logs out, a few of them, like the small ones, actually did burn, and I got a few chunks of charcoal from it. So I'm just going to chuck it right in there. Getting the steel into the bonfire was easy. Getting it out, that was the hard part. Okay, that's nice and hot. Let's chuck this nail in and heat it up. I spent the last week doing plumbing work in 40-degree heat, shoveling gravel into trenches, but the heat radiating off this forge was way worse than anything I've ever experienced. I'm way too hot. The thing is, I can't actually hold onto the nail with this properly. I have to get in there, and it takes me like 5 minutes to actually get the nail out of the forge. And by then, it's cold. Well, I must say that I definitely like woodworking more than this. So I decided to head over to Mitre 10 to buy some rebar to weld onto the nail, so I don't have to put my bare hands so close to the fire. When my phone buzzed, it was a notification from a new website I subscribed to called Cura. It's like Reddit, but with less racism and questionable subreddits. And someone asked the question, do railroad spikes make good knives? And the answer from literally everyone was no. Remember how I talked about the metal's carbon content being vital for a knife edge? Well, railroad spikes apparently have basically none. Even the high-speed steel spikes are just too soft. And since I just dropped $50 on tanned leather, mink grease, and heavy-duty thread to make a beautiful leather sheath, I decided I needed something that would actually hold an edge. And guess what does have a high carbon content? Old files.
A file is a tool made for a single brutal purpose, wearing down softer metals, so it is hardened to the point of being brittle. If I try to force my will on the steel right now with an angle grinder, the friction from the blade would generate enough heat to ruin the steel structure. And the file is so hard it will likely eat the angle grinder disc before I make a dent. So I'm going to have to alter its grain before I can make a knife that's any good out of it. And the only way to negotiate with steel this hard is with heat. The first step is annealing.
It's red hot in the middle and near the end, but on the very tip it's still cool, so I'm just going to turn it off for another minute or two.
I have to heat the bile until it loses its magnetism. I don't feel like sticking a magnet this close to the blade to check if it's at the right temperature, so I'm just going to assume, judging from the dull cherry red colour it's emitting. And then I buried it in ash to let it cool incredibly slowly over several hours, or in my case overnight. If I let it cool in the open air, it would just harden again. By insulating it, we force a tight crystalline structure of the steel to relax, effectively erasing the steel's memory, turning it soft and workable. At least that's the theory. With this steel softened, I'm googling some nice knife templates. There were quite a few good ones, but they all seemed comically large, and when I tried to scale them down, the handles looked tiny in my hand. But eventually I chose one that looked good. I cut the winner out and laid it on my file.
Okay, this is my first look at the knife. Here it is. I thought it was going to be too big, but I think it's the perfect size. It fits my hand nicely. I'm going to make a nice handle out of this slab, which I made all the pens from in my previous video.
Instead of tracing a thin line that would disappear, I grabbed a Nico pen and colored in the negative space. The plan is simple. Keep the shiny parts, remove the black parts. Before making any metal dust, I realized I needed to fix my respirator, as the filters were ancient. I spent a solid hour wrestling with the plastic casing to try and remove the filters, when I decided to look at the instructions for the first time. And I discovered I'd actually been wearing them wrong the whole time. Instead of having one filter between you and the dust, you're actually supposed to have two. After finally hooking it up the correct way, even though I've been using it for about 2 years, it got me thinking about the galvanized steel I welded last week without the respirator being properly put together. If I stop uploading videos suddenly, it's probably the brain cancer from the zinc fumes. Now, the angle grinder. I am terrified of this tool. When I was at TAFE, an instructor showed us all a photo of a shattered grinding disc that lodged itself inside a guy's cheekbone. That image lives rent-free in my head every time I plug this thing in. Ideally, I'd be wearing a full face shield, but because nothing in the shop ever goes smoothly, my face shield doesn't fit over my respirator. So I had to make a choice, save my face or save my lungs. I chose lungs. The cutting was miserable. Even though I had annealed the file, it fought me every inch of the way. It took ages to cut the profile out, but strangely, that's actually a good sign. If it's this hard to cut when it's supposed to be soft, it means that the carbon content in the steel is extremely high. Which is good because I have a specific finish planned for this blade later, involving acid and nail polish. I have a lot of grinding to do before we can get there, so more on that later. Typically, a standard bench grinder runs too fast for this. It generates friction so quickly that you would heat up the steel and ruin the temper before you can actually shape it. But this isn't a standard grinder. This is a slow speed unit specifically designed for sharpening wood turning tools. I honestly wasn't sure if it would be aggressive and powerful enough to remove this much material, but it worked surprisingly well. It offered a level of control the angle grinder just doesn't have. If I let the steel get too hot right now, it could harden again, so I constantly dipped it in a bucket of water just in case.
Okay, here is the knife so far. It looks pretty good. As you can see, I've got a bevel on both sides. There's about a 1mm gap in between. So right now there is no sharp edge, there's no blade. That's because I read online that you should quench it first, and then once it's hardened, then you put the actual blade on the knife. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to put my bench grinder on a high angle, and I am going to basically create this part of the knife. So right now I've done that part, the very tip, about 2 centimeters around the whole knife. I'm going to put a bevel just like that.
But before we get to the actual blade shaping, 2 critical things need to happen. First, drilling the pinholes in the handle sections so the knife scales don't fall off. Secondly, the file teeth have to go. Some people like to leave the file texture on the side of the blade for a rustic look. I think that's a mistake. These deep grooves are just rust traps. But to be honest, I actually like the look. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grind away only one side of the knife to give it that rustic look. So one side will be shiny and one side will be a file. I decided to weld the galvanized steel bar back onto the knife for the quench.
Okay, I'm not in the shed right now because I'm just waiting for the fumes to go away. So as you can see, this side I've ground down a bit. This side I haven't.
I've spent hours making this soft piece of metal look like a knife. Now we actually have to make it a knife. The quench is pretty much where you take all the disorganized carbon atoms in the steel and force them into a rigid crystalline structure, just like it was before I softened it. It had been raining for days. I don't know why it just started raining just when I decided to make this video, but it did. Kinda weird thing was, after I made this video, it hasn't rained since. Ideally, you want a controlled environment for heat treating. I had a puddle in my forge. It took me an hour and 20 minutes just to convince my forge to start. I actually wanted to quench my blade yesterday, but it was covered in 3 centimeters of water, so I had to wait another day for the sun to dry it out. While the fire was thinking about waking up, I had a problem I had to solve. A lot of people think you just dip the hot steel in water, but water is aggressive. It cools high carbon steel so violently that the blade will almost certainly warp or worse, crack. It needed a slower, gentler medium. I needed oil. I considered raiding the kitchen for cooking oil, but I read that used motor oil works just as well. So I turned to my dirt bike. And honestly, making this knife might have just saved my engine. There was barely a drop left in there. If I had taken my bike out one more time without checking, I would have probably seized the piston. But the problem was the bike didn't give me enough volume to submerge the blade in. I had to improvise. I found a bottle of something in my shed. I think it was some kind of car oil, or maybe pesticide. Honestly, I don't know. I just poured it in with my dirt bike oil. I heated the oil mixture to about 100 degrees to make it thinner, so it wraps around the blade better, as when you heat oil, it thins out. That's why you have to warm up your car before you drive it.
Let's chuck this knife in. I really hope this works, because if it doesn't, all this time has been wasted. Fingers crossed, let's go. It's at about 90 degrees, so that should be hot enough.
The knife sat in my forge for about 20 minutes, soaking up the heat until it reached that critical non-magnetic state. You can't really see the colour on camera well because I did this during the daytime.
Not yet.
Actually wear your gloves when you put it in there.
Yeah, it's a bit hard to tell how hot it is, but if you look in the middle there, it's pretty hot. I don't have a magnet to test how hot it really is. It's good enough. So, let's do this.
If you look at the textbooks, there is a very specific protocol for quenching. Plunge straight down, hold perfectly still for 7 to 10 seconds and remove. I did not know that. Looking back at the footage, it was painfully obvious that I had no idea what I was doing. Panic took the wheel. Instead of a few seconds, I left the blade submerged for minutes. Instead of holding it still to prevent warping, I was bobbing it up and down, swirling it around like I was mixing a cocktail.
Okay. So far so good. I can't see any cracking on it yet. I'm just gonna place it just down here and let it cool down naturally. Hopefully this works. If it doesn't, that's about a month of my life wasted.
Luckily, after 2 hours I came back and the blade actually turned out to be relatively straight. Once the blade had cooled off, I cut off the galvanized steel thing. I don't have a microscope or a hardness tester. I can't look at the grain structure of the steel to see if the quench actually worked. I just have to trust the internet. And the internet says that now this knife is in a fragile state. It is incredibly hard, but it is also dangerously brittle. If I tried to use this now, say, just throw it at a tree, or try to kill a catfish with it, it would suffer critical failure. So to fix the brittleness, we have to soften the steel just a hair. Not as much as I did last time I softened the steel, just enough so it won't snap randomly. This process is called tempering. I used my mum's oven, set it at 200 degrees, and baked the knife for 2 hours. When it came out, the steel had shifted. The dark metallic grey was gone, replaced by a distinct pale yellow gold oxide layer. According to the internet, that colour is called straw. It is a visual promise that the internal stresses have been relaxed. The steel should now be tough enough to handle a catfish, but hard enough to hold an edge. At least, I hope so. With the steel stabilised, it was finally time to give it a handle.
Okay, I'm just sitting on my quad. I think it looks pretty great. It's time to make the handle. And this is my element. I know how to do woodworking. Making a knife, that's all new to me. This is what I'm gonna make the handle out of. This is a slab I got from Kane a while back. And it has some beautiful grain. I'm gonna cut some knife scales out of this. It's gonna look really nice.
I love the contrast of the light creamy tone of the wood against the dark look of the tempered steel. For the pins, I decided to go for copper screws, mostly because I couldn't afford the standard copper rods selling on eBay for $20, and the copper screws cost only $5. I cut some knife scales out of the slab on my bandsaw and traced the rough outline from a template and cut that profile out as well. Everything was prepared perfectly. This is where preparation and poor planning collide. I had no proper 2-part epoxy on hand. In a moment of utter madness, I reached for super glue. I managed to set the first scale on the screws on the knife. But on the second scale, the CA glue cured instantly, and the copper screw was stuck before it threaded completely on. I grabbed my drill and tried to force it.
Fumes. This is a bad idea. I should have used something else, not this. No, I just threaded this. No, I just threaded the I can't breathe all the fumes. This is such a stupid idea. Why did I use CA glue? I should have used like contact adhesive or something.
I was met with a sickening sound of soft metal stripping against hard steel.
I think I know a way I can save this. I need to chuck it in my vise. That might work. Okay, I'm gonna do this quick before it dries. Why didn't I think of this sooner?
The sound signaled the real possibility of destroying months of work. The handle, well, it wasn't even a handle, it looked terrible. The only solution was destruction.
Oh, no. We just snapped it in half. Oh no.
I cut off the failed scale and ground the copper screw completely flush with a knife. Then I glued it back together with some CA glue. The next day I took out my belt sander to shape the handle. But again, my preparation failed. I had accidentally bought extremely fine 120 grit paper. I needed at least 80 grit, something that would aggressively chew away the wood. I stood there for what felt like hours, gently polishing the scale, trying to grind away the centimetre of wood that needed to yield before it was comfortable to hold in my hand. I needed a more aggressive solution. I clamped my most feared tool, the angle grinder, upside down in my vise, with a grinding attachment on the max speed setting. I used the metal grinding sandpaper wheel to shape the scales, and it actually worked surprisingly well. It's unconventional, but it worked. I slowly coaxed the rough handle into something really comfortable to hold.
It's looking amazing.
Time to move on to one of the final components, the sheath.
Let's open it up and see what's in it. Let's see. Okay, it's a thread.
This involved white leather, black thread, and some mink oil to finish it off and make it waterproof. But this is completely outside my comfort zone. I'm a woodworker, not a seamstress. I have no idea what I'm doing here. The initial plan was to wet mold the leather, soak in water to make it soft and pliable, then form it perfectly to the knife's shape. But whatever I did it wrong. I suspect soaking the leather in boiling water for a full hour might have been a mistake.
No, it's like half the size, doesn't fit anymore. And it's swelled up. That doesn't look the same, does it?
No.
Man. Okay, at least I got one more try. I'm just going to skip the shrinking step entirely. I'm just going to try and bend it.
The leather immediately thickened, expanded to 3 times the size, and then shrunk into a thick, stiff, unworkable lump. It was a disaster. I gave up on this technique and relied on brute force. I cut out another chunk of leather and then folded it on itself. Before I drilled a single hole in the leather, I glued the 2 sides together with some CA glue.
Yes, it fits. Let's go. So right now, I've glued it all in. Yeah, I forgot to tell you guys, I got my braces off. So I can talk without a lisp now, which is pretty good. So I put CA glue and activate on everything, and then I put it in the vise, as you can see down there.
This gave me a rigid shell to work with. Once the glue cured, I drilled the holes along the entire edge with a tiny 1.5mm drill bit, and then threaded the whole thing together with black thread and a needle. It's a crude approach, but it holds. With the shape constructed, the woodworker in me took over for the finishing. I cut off the excess leather with my bandsaw and then smoothed and polished the edges, clean on my belt sander. I then stabilized the jointed sides with some CA glue. Finally, a deep coat of mink oil to soften the material up and give it some waterproof protection. The sheath is done. Now it's time to finish off this knife. It's time to do the acid etch. I wet sanded the entire surface, cleaning every single molecule of oil off the steel. It needs to be surgically clean for the acid etch.
Okay, it's now time to acid etch this blade. Let's go.
The goal was a simple pattern. I used a blue Nico pen to mark the lines I wanted to stay light. Everything else that is not covered with the Nico pen will become dark with the acid. I submerged the whole thing in a container of simple house salt vinegar and waited. Five minutes later, I checked up on it, and the experiment failed. All the Nico pen I put on it peeled off, and the entire blade was exposed to the acid. But to be honest, it ended up looking better than I expected. It's got this deep, dark, slightly rustic aesthetic look, and I think it actually looks good. To finish off the handle, I applied a generous coat of olive oil, and the wood is absolutely stunning. It's drinking up all the oil. If you know what species of wood this is, leave a comment below, because I have no idea what type of wood it is. All I know is it looks really nice. And finally, the test that every knife maker has to do, slicing through a piece of paper. And it's sharp, and now is ready to sell. Actually, no. I don't want to sell this. This is the first knife I've ever made. I will hopefully make many more in the future, so this has sentimental value to me. So I'm not going to sell it. But if you want to know what my eBay 30-day total is, it's a whopping $30. Because someone actually bought one of my pens from my last video. Thanks for watching. If you want to see what happened to the money that should have gone towards my etching chemicals, you can watch that video on the screen now. I spent $3,000 on the last video, and since I'm not Mr. Beast, my wallet hasn't fully recovered yet. Subscribe.